convenient.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be welcome for our seminar called Arts Parliament. This is our event about the social security systems and circumstances concerning artists and workers in the cultural and creative sector, and also an event that from our behalf also addresses the future parliamentary elections that the European Union is going to have in a short while. This seminar has an emphasis on European cultural policy, on the European Commission's objectives for European Union's cultural and creative sector and industries. The seminar is being organized by Arts Promotion Centre Finland, and we have taken part in knowledge building and debates, especially in issues concerning social security and livelihood of professionals in cultural and creative sectors, also in European perspective. And as said, this seminar is part of our series called Arts Parliaments. The previous Arts Parliament was organized a year ago, preceding the Finnish parliamentary elections, and that took place around March last year. The European Parliament has 2023 proposed an European Union framework to improve the living and working conditions of workers in the cultural and creative fields. The coordination of national systems, together with other regulations on livelihood of professionals, are currently in Europe in an unequal position, and that is also a concern that we have here in Finland. Employee status guarantees a person, through European labour legislation and national labour legislation, a right to a minimum wage, a right for collective bargaining, a right for working hours, and a right for health protection. The right to paid vacation and unemployment and sickness benefits and pensions. But as we all know, a large number of artists are excluded from these kinds of benefits because of their status in the labour markets. Almost 40% of professionals that are working in culture and creative sector are in the lowest 3 wage deciles in the income ratio. Decile might not be a word that you are all familiar, therefore a short translation, meaning that 40% of professionals are within the bottom 30% of all the income wages that we have in our system. Meaning simply that professionals working in cultural and creative sectors are earning substantially less than other professionals in other spheres of society. What has then European Union to say about social security of artists? Social security coverage of art and creative sector professionals varies within and between countries. Due to differences in sectors and types of work, and that leads to differences in working conditions. In the previous Art Parliament events, we have heard examples of social security solutions for artists from other parts of Europe. We have heard, for example, of basic income models that were taking into place in Ireland a while ago, and we have also heard of examples from Estonia where they had a rapid social security model that was taken into account during the pandemic era while COVID was troubling us all in our everyday life. But for this event, this Art Parliament, we delve into following questions. First of all, we are hearing some examples how can European Union ensure through legislative and other means that equal working conditions for artists are realized and possible throughout the European Union. We are delving into a question concerning what does the situation for artists look like from the perspective of last and latest surveys that have been finished of the livelihood of artists working in Europe. And we are delving into a question of what means can we use to strengthen the ecosystems of arts and culture by identifying the challenges, opportunities and needs of creative and cultural sector professionals. And as of today, I can proudly say that these same debates are going to continue in European Union headquarters in Brussels on Thursday this week. And also some of our experts from Arts Promotion Center Finland, abbreviated as TAIKE, are attending that meeting in Brussels on Thursday. And for us in TAIKE, it is very important that we have a good connection and we are well informed of the political circumstances and decision making that is taking place within the European framework. And therefore, this is kind of also serving as a springboard also for wider European discussions of the same topic. Okay, about the program for this event. I'm trying to find the correct card from my handouts. We are first going to hear of the role of the European Commission in developing livelihoods of artists, and I'm soon going to present you the first speaker of this event. Then we are going to have a continuous discussion concerning the importance of EU-level guidelines in terms of arts and artist policies. We are going forward to hear latest news and surveys concerning European livelihood, surveys concerning artists and cultural professionals. And then we are getting some feedback of the lobbying work done in European election in terms of goals and objectives in terms of arts and culture. And after that, we are going to move ahead to our final discussion, which is concentrating on the coming elections. And we have two candidates for the parliament that are going to join us in our event. And we are going to discuss with Riku Nieminen and Sirpa Pietikäinen of their thoughts concerning European policies in terms of cultural and creative sector and what kind of objectives we might have from Finnish perspective in that kind of debate. So, put in short, that is our plan for this event, and you people following us on the streamline, you can see that I am looking at various angles on this room. We have some 15 people here joining us in Taideparlamentti, Taideparlamentti in Finland, where we are actually recording this event. It's nice to be here within the basement of the stronghold of the power in Finland. This is the building where the local policies or national policies are being defined, so it's kind of good to speak of European circumstances here from the Parliament of Finland. Okay, but now I'm privileged to introduce to you the first speaker of this event. We are going to be joined by Barbara Stacher, senior expert from European Commission. Barbara, you have been working for the European Commission for over 20 years in different policy areas and are currently working in European Commission's Directorate General for Education and Culture and in the Cultural Policy Unit of that Directorate General. You have also been working with the OMC, meaning Open Method of Coordination, within the European Union member states expert group working with artists' working conditions. And we have also heard of the findings of that survey here in Finland. And Barbara's field of work is cultural policymaking, in particular the crossroads of cultural and creative sectors, industries, and social inclusion, job creation, and linking up creative sectors and policymakers. So, now I'm inviting Barbara Yu to take the virtual stage, and the stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you also for all of the participants to be here, because it is very important that you as Parliament participate in these discussions, because I'm going to answer right away one of the questions that was done in the introduction. What is the role of the EU and of the Commission in this very important topic on artists' working conditions? Well, the role is actually none according to the treaties, because the Commission, the EU, does not have competences on culture and also not on social security. So in this sense, this is member states' competences, and member states, you know, there is kind of this thing, Brussels is so strong and Brussels is deciding everything. Well, these kind of issues actually show that it's not the case, because the Commission is not allowed to become active on these subjects. You can look it up in the treaty articles. The role of the Commission is merely restricted to helping with the blossoming of cultures. So kind of, you know, it's very weak. Because before I was working in trade policies, it's a completely different thing, because there the Commission has exclusive competences, where the member states have delegated their competences to the Commission. But it's not the case neither for culture nor on social security systems, because countries want to keep these competences. So this just as an outset. Funnily, or I think it's a good development, sometimes member states ask the EU for help, or artists ask the EU directly for help, saying, my God, you need to do something at EU level. We know that you cannot, but please still try to do something. So this also got to the member states, which you are important, you are parliamentarians. Without your voices, you know, member states, they don't act in a vacuum. I mean, your ministers somehow, you know, in this electoral cycle, they want to be re-elected. So they do listen to what you have to say. So this is already for the second time that the EU work plan for culture includes the topic of artists' status and working conditions, which of course the EU has no competence, as I said, to work on this, but still they're asking us for it. So that's very good. The funding programs, that is more straightforward. They are, because you were talking in your introduction about setting the right framework, there it's a huge success in reality that EU funding for cultural and creative sectors has been increased by huge percentages. Not only Creative Europe program, but also Horizon. It's the research program. There are a lot of topics on culture, cultural heritage, creative industries. Digital Europe, also digitization is relevant. Invest EU, structural funds, the KIC, culture and creative communities. So there is a lot of EU funding available now for cultural and creative sectors and industries. So that's also due to your voice is all being loud and being heard. Plus, COVID, of course, added to it, because people became, you know, they understood that without culture, they cannot really survive also. So during COVID has become pretty obvious. So all of this make a strong case for what you are doing. Here, just wanted to say, if you want to look up how to find the right EU funding for culture, you can go to that website. So let's go to artists' working conditions. Now, as has been said by the person doing the introduction, cultural and creative sectors, at EU level, they are represented by different networks like Culture Action Europe, who, for example, now they published yet a very new survey just last week about artists' working conditions EU-wide. Pearl, FIA, so you also have the social partners. I mean, I'm from Austria, you're from Finland, so yeah, social partners, we know that they can be very strong. So at EU level, we have also these social partner dialogues on performing arts, for example. That's also quite important. Then the council, meaning the ministers, as we said, in their work plans for culture and in different council working groups, they have also looked at artists' working conditions, continue to do so. Like in the introduction, it was said this Thursday is a huge presidency event on the topic. And of course, you being parliamentarians or the parliament, arts parliament, the European Parliament, of course. So that's also very important. It actually, they already started in 2006 to work on a huge report about artist statues and what is missing. So just to say that sometimes things advance quite slowly, then they did resolutions in 2020, 21, and now they did an own initiative legislative report, which is quite a strong instrument because usually, you know, the parliament cannot do legislation by themselves. So, but they are asking the commission now to do something. So that was just approved in November last year. Now we are starting to work on all these different tasks they asked us to do. Then there is a commission study, which we did, civil society dialogue, oops, sorry, and the open method of coordination member states expert group that was mentioned. That was a very, very important work. It was important also because it was not only the ministries of culture, it was also together with the ministries of social affairs and employment of the 27 EU member states. All of them participated. And they looked at the different topics, artist statues and social security, fair practice, skills, and also artistic freedom, which is actually can also be included in this topic. So look at their report, it's very interesting and gives also a lot of case studies. Something else which is happening in parallel, since the EU doesn't have competences on the social state, it's of course also very important what different countries do. So you mentioned some examples already, Estonia and Ireland you mentioned, but of course there are also other important work happening. For example, some countries are thinking about an artist statute, so meaning an own, statute for artists. France and Belgium have had that for many, many years. You can look at their experience. It's also mentioned in this report. If you're interested in what are the benefits as opposed to what you have in Finland. Now, Spain and Portugal and also other countries have introduced from zero such artist status legislation. And Belgium has improved their own legislation because now they made it wider. They also include the technicians, the sound engineers. So they made their artist status wider. Then there is another approach. It's called fairness process. That's what has been done in Netherlands and in Austria. And also other countries now have started to become interested. And then, of course, some countries use the EU's recovery and resilience facility, which was a lot of money during COVID times, and also other specific measures. And of course, the Irish basic income scheme is, of course, very relevant. Now, where can you find that? Where can you compare things that has been done in different countries? So after this OMC group, somebody said, gosh, but how should we keep this information updated, all these things that countries are doing? So we created a platform on a website on the platform Creatives Unite. And there you can, for example, look in the different parts. For example, here I ticked status and social security. I chose randomly 3 countries, and there you can see what each country is doing. You know, you can also select different topics and see what decrees and what's foreseen. Then you can also find interesting information about, for example, social security types, which countries cover what kind of social security type. Yeah, this platform is interesting also. It has also other things which are important, like how to get to money for cultural and creative sectors and industries beyond EU funding, not only EU funding, but also philanthropy, crowd lending and other topics, intellectual property for cultural and creative sectors. So it is a very huge, wealthy website with lots of topics, and you can also contribute and put in your own contributions if you have something to share there. Well, yes, what are we doing now? What are the next steps? Well, the European Parliament has asked the Commission to become active on different topics, which is important for us because, of course, we cannot just do things like that. So my colleagues from DG Employment, which is kind of the employment kind of ministry in the Commission, they are looking at labor law and they're trying to identify what is missing, also good practice on social protection. They are working with social partners to see what is exactly what social partners want. Then, like the workshop which is taking place this Thursday, it will be a yearly thematic workshop on artists' working conditions. So it's just a way to ensure that things are happening, so that from year to year, we can kind of see what has happened and what needs to happen and what has not happened and why. Then EU strategic framework for culture, that's kind of more, the strategic level, because in reality, the EU, we cannot legislate on social security, but what we can do is share experiences and also provide kind of frameworks. And that's actually already working. It has been quite surprising how member states, how countries like to copy from each other, but they can only copy from each other if somebody brings them together, actually. So that is very valuable processes. And that, of course, needs to continue. Then we promised the Parliament to continue working on this platform to expand information. But for that, of course, we'd also need, social partners or cultural sector people to give us some feedback of what is working, what still needs to be done in a better way. Then some mappings that we promised to the Parliament, then EU funding programs. Well, that's another issue because, of course, the Parliament has asked, the Parliament is responsible for the money at EU level. So they can ask they have asked actually to make sure that EU money is spent respecting artist working conditions. So now we're looking at how to best do this. But on the other hand, we also don't want to make it more bureaucratic. To apply for funding is already very bureaucratic. You have to fill in so many forms. So that's a bit, okay, my colleagues will have to see how to best do this without adding yet more bureaucracy. Yes, then there will be, of course, the copyright directive, the digital single market directive implementation. That's very important because it's not implemented everywhere in the same way and needs to respect fair working conditions also for the platform and the digital side. And yes, then we also said we would organize a high-level roundtable on artists' working conditions as soon as the new commission is in place, because as was said in the introduction, very important, there is the elections for the new EU Parliament. Please vote. And then as soon as the new EU Parliament is in place, a new EU Commission will be in place with a whole set of new commissioners. So yeah, the idea is to do this roundtable as soon as they are in place. So basically to ensure continuity that this process continues. So thank you very much. Your support and all your input is, of course, hugely welcome. It's also very important that you keep feedback, that you do your feedback to your ministries, also to your social partners, to make sure that what you think needs to be fixed is actually fixed. Of course, what was mentioned, a huge challenge is the freelancers who do not have employment contracts. So yeah, that is also a huge challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barbara Stacher, for your valuable words and description how things look like from the Brussels perspective. And I have the privilege next to present our following speaker, who is also going to give a kind of response to you from a Finnish perspective. And the next speaker is called Maria Hirvi-Iäs. Maria is a senior researcher from KUPORE, which is an abbreviation that derives from the Cultural Policy Research Foundation, if I got it right also in English. Maria is the driving force behind numerous research projects on the situation and social status of professional artists working in Finland. And actually we've been working also with Maria once in a visual arts commission and committee in our system in Finland. As a cultural policy researcher, Maria is interested in the politics of culture, the critique of cultural policy and the Nordic perspectives on cultural policy. And she will be today speaking and, as said, also kind of responding to Barbara's words with the title, The Importance of EU-level Guidelines in the Arts and Artist Policies in the Nordic Countries. Okay, so Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry, and thank you, Barbara. Yes, I have been asked to give some comments on the importance of EU-level guidelines in the arts and artist policies in the Nordic countries. I want to first to emphasize that I have a researcher's perspective on these questions, and just to make it a little bit more clear about what KUPORE is, it's Center for Cultural Policy Research, and art and artist policy is only one of our focus areas. And we have ongoing research that is mainly, we could divide it in 3 different kinds of research projects. And one is the Arts and Culture Barometer, which is an annual survey that has been produced since 2015 on the working conditions, and that has been done in collaboration with the Art Promotion Center, Taike. We also have started the first round of a register-based research that we called As an Artist in Finland. And there we want to define the register-based professional artists, which is a little bit different approach. And that is done in collaboration with the Statistics Finland, the Ministry of Education and Culture, and also Taike, and different kind of artist organizations and grant foundations. There, after that, we also have different kind of thematic projects that are more or less ongoing. One is focusing on the diversity and equity on the sector of arts and culture, and also looking at specifically on the social sector as a working area for artists, and also about the social and psychological well-being at work. That is done together with the Finnish Institute of Occupational Health. So we try to cover a lot of different kind of perspectives on the artist working conditions. Then what comes to the Nordic countries in EU, we try to always to mirror our structures with the Nordic countries, and there is a collaboration between the Nordic countries through the Minister of Council in Copenhagen, and also the Nordic Council. We do have common cultural policy features in the Nordic countries. We are all based on the structures of the welfare state historically. But we do have different operating environments and different kind of national characteristics. So we cannot say that we have a structure that is identical. And we also have to remember that not all Nordic countries are members of the EU. So Finland, Sweden and Denmark are members of the EU, but Norway and Iceland are not. That does not mean that they are not following the processes and working very close cooperation with different kind of EU measures. So there's, what comes to the EU regulations, I think one basic benefits is that you kind of open up the horizon and look at what are the governmental measures of support to the working conditions of artists and professionals in the Nordic countries. And also looking at the legal status, that's a regulation status, not only the practices and traditions. And one of the basic questions that comes very clear in the OMC report, and also was on the list of what is going to be need to be mapping, is the definition of the artist. As we know, the artist is an open profession. Nobody can say that you're not an artist. So anybody could say that they are an artist. So, and that is something that also UNESCO in the 1980 status has taken as a point of departure. But of course, we have to narrow it down. Not everybody can be seen as an artist. So maybe the important thing with the OMC report is that it's a more occupationally active person who is identified at least by one of the following legal frameworks of taxation, labor law, social security, and access to public funding. And the question about the professional artist is not absolutely clear. As we come to the larger area of cultural and creative sectors. So we talk about cultural professionals, or professionals in the cultural field. So there is a lot of discussions around that we will not finish with yet. But also the status of the artist is a kind of easy way to put it out, but it's important to say that it's the way in which the professional situation is regulated. So I think it's also one of the basic benefits with this report is that it takes the profession as seriously. So it's not a privilege to be an artist. It's not an honorary mention that, oh, you're so good, you're like an artist. But there must be explicit recognitions of artists, that they should have, like we know, the same kind of adequate and appropriate working conditions as any other professionals. And also it's really important to point out that it is built across different policy sectors. We work with the cultural policy research, but we know it spills over many times over and into different kind of policy sectors. And it's not always that easy to get the dialogue and understandings of labor employment policies, social security systems, and taxation, what comes to arts and artist policies. And also these different kind of policy sectors are the various pathways to recognition as an artist, what comes to the OMC report. So what do we say about the Nordic model for artist policies then? It becomes also clear in the report, because it's very little said about the Nordic countries in the OMC report. And one point is that we have specific state organizations focused on promoting the arts. Taike we know in Finland, and in Sweden they have Konstnärsnämnden, the Swedish Arts Grant Committee, and in Denmark they have the Danish Arts Foundation. So it's regulated from the top level. So we have these state grant systems, we have awards, etc., that is kind of very long way back in the Nordic countries, as part of the artist policy, as well, part of one of the key questions within cultural policy has been the artist policy systems. But also that we define artistic quality and significance, and through that, the artist professionals, through peer review. We don't have a structure that kind of secure your identity as an artist, but it's an ongoing process within the structure of the peer-reviewed applications for grants and so on. And we also have a very strong structure for the artist associations. It's a significant role in all the Nordic countries. And we also have very high level of artist education on the university levels. what comes to the working conditions, I mean, the Nordic countries, as I said, are part of the welfare structures since hundreds of years, or at least 150 years. And also the idea is to have the welfare state emphasis equal treatment, which is also including the practices of artists' conditions. But somehow the intersection between the practices that enables the uniqueness of artistic work, it is always a part of the general equal treatment, as we have heard. So when viewed through this EU framework, the focus tends to be more on general principles rather than practices enabling uniqueness. And the special conditions of the artists and professionals in the creative industries are recognized in different ways in the various Nordic countries. So we have different definitions of who is being talked about and who is speaking. And we have different kind of definitions of the sector of creative industries and creative economy. So instead of having a legally defined special status for artists, we have different, various kinds of direct and indirect forms of support. So this is my last slide. What is the significance of the OMC report in the future? Well, we are following it, of course. We are following the seminar on Thursday to see what kind of recommendations that is discussed and what kind of recommendations would be needed. That is really important, both for on the EU level and all the states, member states. And of course, we are, as in Kupore, we are really interested in seeing how it affects the research on art and artist policies. And we do know that there is a lot of more knowledge needed, even if you look at the Nordic environment. So we have a discussion with the Nordic colleagues to develop the cooperation between all these countries to follow up the research on it. And I think it's really interesting to see what kind of, to what extent does the uniqueness of artists and arts appear in the cultural policies today. Because I have a feeling that it can be a little bit flowing away, and will be very interesting to follow the discussions what comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria Hirvies. It's kind of strange not to applaud after speeches while being here in the studio. This kind of virtual applause for Maria and also for Barbara, who has got some cheers here from the studio. Good. I would say that from both of these speeches, both Barbara's and Maria's, I think I had a kind of ever-growing feeling that we in Finland should be quite conscious and quite kind of, we should be active in all the ways we know that we can also support our agenda from the Finnish perspective also to European Union level, so that we can realize what are the possibilities, where we should be kind of aware, where things are being decided within the European level that also have an influence also for the cultural creative sectors in Finland. And this is something that I think we all should be, let's say, aware of. But hey, now we are following the program, and I'm now looking towards from my perspective, the left-hand side. We have here a visitor and guest from, I don't actually know from where, but Panteia is the organization called. Netherlands. The Netherlands is the correct answer for the whereabouts of the location of the Panteia. Martin Clark, a senior researcher at Panteia, will be speaking to us with the title European Livelihood Survey of Artists and Cultural Professionals. And a few words, first of all, of Martin to present to you our next speaker. Panteia and Cultural Action Europe are this spring carrying out a study regarding the status and working conditions of artists and cultural and creative professionals in Europe. So this is very, very current now, on top of the time that we are now going to hear from Martin. Martin has worked extensively for European Union institutions, such as the European Commission and its agencies, the European Parliament, as well as other national and international clients. Martin has experience in a wide range of policy areas in the fields of social and economic research, including working conditions, occupational safety, and health and social security. So these words for introducing you, Martin, for our audience, and it's now your turn.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I would just like to point out that on the slides there is a QR code. You can access the report I'm about to discuss via this QR code, so if you are interested, please do that, and I'll hang on to this slide for a brief moment so you can do so. My name is Martin Clark, as I mentioned, and I'm here to discuss the research that we've been carrying out on the status and working conditions of artists and cultural and creative professionals. In particular, I'll be discussing the findings from our recent Creative Pulse survey that we just published the report last week, which we carried out along with Culture Action Europe. So I'll move on to the next slide. Just a quick introduction to Pantaya. We are one of the largest organisations specialised in policy applied research in Europe. We're based in the Netherlands. And between 2015 and 2020, we coordinated the European Expert Network on Culture and Audiovisual for DG EAC at the European Commission. In the context of this, we carried out 2 OMC reports, preliminary reports for the working group before they started their work. These 2 were on gender gaps in the cultural and creative sectors and the status and working conditions of artists, which we'll be discussing today. Other relevant work that we've carried out, we've done lots of work in the music sector. We worked on the preparatory action in 2018 for the based on the European Parliament preparatory action for the Commission. We've also just launched a study with the European Commission to look at the discoverability of diverse European content in a digital environment. That's just started. We've also looked at copyright, for instance, for WIPO as well, and we've also done quite some sectoral work, including the theatre sector, heritage sector, and also the circus sector. Okay, so our study we did as part of the ENCA network on the status of artists was carried out in 2019 and was published in 2020. The objectives being to look at working conditions broadly, to also include, say, the nature of income, social security and taxation measures, the impact of mobility, and also looking at artistic freedom as well. As you can probably guess by the dates I provided, the pandemic happened during this time, which threw somewhat of a spanner in the works, but also really added to the research as well, because we could really talk about the current situation as we knew then on artists. So this report was carried out using desk research, as well as consultation with experts, stakeholders, and representative sectoral groups. We carried out a number of interviews and workshops, and there was also a steering committee that was involved in the project, which included Culture Action Europe, IETM, On the Move, Pearl, and FreeMuse. This study was input for the OMC group meeting with the member states, and obviously there's been the subsequent report, as well as a Voices of Culture report on this. As Barbara mentioned earlier, there's now the Creatives Unite platform, and obviously the legislative proposal from the European Parliament as follow-up actions since then. Based on this study, which was, as I said, mentioned, mostly based on desk research and interviews, we determined that artists and creative professionals were most likely to be self-employed, freelance, work part-time, work multiple jobs, which means that they're not obviously covered by social security protection in all cases. Artists and creative professionals highly involved in cross-border mobility, and we looked at a number of different measures taken in the member states, with the most comprehensive laws being a wide range of concrete policies to address specific issues and the various challenges faced by artists. We also saw that some member states choose to discuss fair practice rather than fair pay in order to go beyond salary and link good governance with policies on diversity and inclusion. So there are different types of legal status for artists adopted within the European Union, as mentioned before earlier. Most member states have some form of measures linked to the self-employment and freelance regime, including unemployment insurance schemes for freelance artists, access to pension, dedicated taxation systems, and specific contribution systems. We've mentioned some of these prior today, but some of the interesting practices that come from this report and since, obviously the basic income for the arts in Ireland. There's also the paying the artist policy, which was introduced in 2020, focusing on ensuring fair pay and compensation for artists. In Spain, it was already mentioned as well, but the status of the statute of the artist there. Some measures have already been adopted in this regard, such as fixed-term contract models, specifically designed for artists, and adapting the definition of artists to include technical staff, as well as new unemployment benefits for artists. In the Netherlands, we have fair practice codes, which are included if it's they're a condition for receiving government subsidies. And in France, there's the intermittence du spectacle system, which allows performing artists to have access to social security coverage. So, following on from this, we decided to do the Creative Pulse study. One of the issues that we had with the previous ENCA report was we didn't really have a lot of data from the artist perspective. So we looked at, okay, we have EU-level data, the European Working Conditions Survey, sorry. But we don't find we can't really provide the sector-specific insights with this survey. It doesn't ask some of the questions, for instance, that we would like to know, which we included in our survey. There's also issues with NACE codes, which don't necessarily reflect the subsectors so well. So we decided we need to have some statistics to allow for evidence-based policymaking. Therefore, Pantea and Culture Action Europe, we developed a short survey regarding the status and working conditions of artists and creative professionals. We called it the Creative Pulse Survey. And in terms of the timing of this was really a response to the European Parliament proposal for the EU framework, and as a way to collect first-hand experiences from artists and professionals regarding their working conditions. And on the basis of this, we collected the data and we developed a short report for policy-making purposes. So in terms of the methodology, we actually launched two surveys. One was a survey of artists and cultural and creative sector professionals. The second survey was a survey of cultural organizations, institutions, and policymakers. There were some questions which were the same, but some slightly different questions included, because we felt that questions related to the future policymaking aspects, maybe the artists weren't the best level to do this. Maybe they're not aware of kind of the European level developments, which we wanted to kind of get some feedback on. So we didn't ask exactly the same questions in both, but in some cases we asked generally the same questions on both surveys. We took a snowball approach in terms of getting responses. We disseminated the survey via web link through multiple channels, such as our own networks in the cultural and creative sectors, based on our work with ENCA, and also the wide network from Culture Action Europe members. We also had support from the European Commission on this as well. This led to what we thought was quite a good response rate. We received almost 1,500 survey responses, 1,200 of these being from artists and creative professionals themselves, which is very important. In terms of who actually responded to our survey, the majority were either freelance or self-employed, 62% were women, and in terms of the age profile, the majority were in the 35 to 54-year-old age bracket. There's quite a lot of information on this slide, sorry, but just to indicate the characteristics in terms of member states, we had quite an uneven distribution across member states, as you may be able to see from the data. We had a large number of responses from Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, Slovakia, Italy, and Portugal. Unfortunately, not so many from Finland, I'm afraid, but maybe next time.
0 from Luxembourg.
Yeah, Luxembourg was the only country where we didn't actually have any responses in the artist survey. And also, in terms of the organisations, there was a kind of a mixed spread with some more than others, but we did have a lot of EU or multi-state level organisations participate as well. And in terms of the sector, we had quite a lot of responses from the music, performing arts and the visual arts sectors, also quite significant from the cultural heritage sector, audiovisual sector as well. The percentages on this don't actually add up because we also invited the artists to indicate more than one sector if they are multidisciplinary. So in terms of the actual findings from the survey, I'm going to run through some of the key ones now. So one of the main things we found was that artists in the cultural and creative sectors work multiple jobs. 68% in total of our respondents indicated this. Interestingly, a third indicated that these jobs are outside, these multiple second jobs were outside the cultural and creative sectors, which is quite a high amount. And the performing arts sector is the one where we're most likely to see artists and professionals working more than one job. The survey also reiterated the importance of cross-border mobility to the cultural and creative sector. Nearly 50% of the respondents indicated they are involved in cross-border mobility, and 33% of these are frequently mobile. What was interesting from further analysis of the data was that artists and professionals working cross-border were less likely to report poor working conditions compared to those who were not mobile. We asked the artists and the professionals to reflect on their own working conditions. For this, we provided them with a definition and some idea based on a Eurofound proposal of what working conditions consists of. This includes terms and conditions of employment, skills, employability, training, health, safety and well-being, working time and work-life balance, for instance. As you can see from the results, quite a high percentage indicate that they have poor working conditions, 46%, so nearly half. And the visual arts sector is where we found there was most likely to indicate poor working conditions. Unsurprisingly, freelance and self-employed artists were most likely to report poor working conditions. We also asked the cultural organisations, institutions and policymakers some questions on this as well. 71% believe that addressing working conditions in the sector is a priority, and just over half indicate that the working conditions have changed for the worst over the past 3 years. We have some information at member state level from member states where we received enough responses to be able to make some form of comparison. It's a limited sample, but it's just to give an indication in the kind of differences between the member states where we did have enough data. As we can see from the figures, Spanish and Italian artists are most likely to indicate poor working conditions. In the Netherlands and Slovakia, they fare slightly better. But as I said, this is a limited sample, but just to give an indication of some of the differences between. We also asked questions on the access to social protection in the sector. A very high percentage of artists indicated that they lack sufficient access to social protection, 71% in total. Freelance and self-employed artists and professionals were the most likely to have least access to social protection, which is not surprising. In terms of member state level, again, obviously bearing the limitations, once again, Spain and Italy artists were most likely to indicate they did have access to sufficient social protection. But as we can see from the figures, it tends to be quite high figures across the board in terms of a lack of access. We also addressed the nature of income in the sector. Many artists and professionals in the sector struggle financially. The vast majority feel that they are not fairly remunerated for their work. 84% in total indicated this. Mostly freelance and self-employed, but as we can see from the figures as well, it's generally it's quite high in terms of feeling that they're not fairly remunerated for their work. In the survey, we had a number of open and closed questions. So in the open questions, we were able to go a bit more in depth to give some context to why this was the case. In the case of income, we noted that there was an absence of pay rises or increases in fees over time, which caused this. Irregular payments from clients, for instance, was another major reason, and also restricted access to the market. We also looked at the impact of COVID-19. We know that the culture sector was one of the most negatively affected by the pandemic. 66% indicated that the pandemic had a negative impact on the working conditions, with the loss of income being the most visible result of this. in terms of that 50% almost indicated that the pandemic had a negative impact on their income. We were also able to briefly look at the gender-related data, because we collected information on this as well. Women were more likely than men to report poor working conditions. Women were also more likely to indicate they were unfairly remunerated, and also were more likely to report lack of access to social protection. The only one of the anomalies was men were more impacted during COVID-19 in terms of income. Quite an alarming and surprising result of the survey was in regards to artistic freedom. Almost a third, over a third, indicated they had been impacted by limitations to their freedom to express themselves artistically, and almost half indicated that this had increased in the last 5 years. This was also reflected in the organisational survey as well. In the open kind of responses that we got, the political situations in member states was one of the biggest reasons for this, with survey respondents from both surveys indicating that this must be guaranteed regardless of changes in government and across borders as well. We also briefly looked at some of the main trends influencing working conditions in the sector. The lack of uniform status or definition of artist, as well as atypical working patterns, were having the biggest negative impact on working conditions, but mobility was seen as having the most positive impact on working conditions. So where does this lead us? We asked some questions on the kind of the prospective look on, based on the recent proposal from the Parliament and possible Commission actions on this. Well, there was a very high percentage indicating that of artists indicating support for European artist status, 93%. 71% believe insufficient attention has been given towards working conditions, and also there's majority support for legislation and for a status of artist. There was also high response rate support for a EU directive, as well for measures to address the digital transformation, and also the issues of social conditionality within the requirements of the Creative Europe programme, as well as 65% calling for strengthening cross-border mobility, which we see as a very important factor in promoting good working conditions in the sector. And there are also quite high percentages calling for more comparable data and exchange of best practices among member states. So what were the key lessons that we learned from this survey? The idea being mostly was we wanted to fill some data gaps that we noted from our previous research at the European level, but this was only a test in a sense, or a pilot to kind of see what we can do more in terms of data. In any case, we felt it was a valuable tool for understanding the realities faced by those in the sector, and this data can play a role in informing policy decisions and advocating for improvements in working conditions, particularly to address some of the gaps in the data that we get from the European Working Conditions Survey, for instance. We also see that artists and creators are very eager to engage, and the open responses to the questions provided a very good picture of the context behind the data in the sector. But we also understand that it's better to have a more representative sample across member states, so we can look clearly at the geographical differences and help to tailor more specific policies and to address these various needs. To do that, translation of the questionnaire would be beneficial, because we only did an English questionnaire for this one. But we also found that we're having connections in the member states with our network who we can get to disseminate the survey, really help to generate a high number of responses. So in terms of the next steps for what we want to do now, we want to explore possible follow-up actions with the data set that we have. We want to do some sector-specific analysis where we have high responses, such as music or performing arts. And also do some member state reports where we have enough respondents. We're currently doing a short report in the Netherlands now for some stakeholders there. So that would be interesting to find a more local related information from the data. And ultimately, we'd like to explore some further creative pulse surveys with our partners to also collect more relevant data. And the key, therefore, again, is building relationships with stakeholders in the various member states. But the main idea being that we promote an artist and creator-centric approach. So we're collecting data from the artists and the professionals directly, because this is the best source for developing tailored policy actions to address the needs. Thank you very much for your time.
You get also audible applauses. Hey, Martin, could you please, I have just two quick questions, kind of to clarify things yet further. When is this going to be published, and how can we get the materials?
It was published last week on Monday.
Okay.
So it's available. I can share with you, and you can share with.
And we can share with the
share
people.
with everyone. Yeah, we've disseminated via LinkedIn and via our platform websites at Pantaya and Culture Action Europe as well. So during that, go to their websites. You can get the information directly there. It's a nice report, hopefully, and
That's excellent. And another short question will be that do you have plans to repeat this at some intervals?
That would be a nice idea. I think we're working towards that, and also tailoring the survey a bit and trying to work with experts in the member states to get these connections to be able to get a more representative sample across Europe. But yeah, we are exploring that possibility for the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. And we in Finland, we keep wondering who are the 14 respondents to your survey. But good job. And in case there will be another survey like this, we will also do some work to get more respondents for this questionnaire. So please be sure of that. But okay, but now we are going to go to a kind of follow-up and responding speech concerning your speech, Martin. Our next guest will be Lars Ebert, who is working as the Secretary General in Culture Action Europe. And Lars will be speaking of the lobbying work in terms of EU parliamentary elections, and what are the goals of arts associations in terms of the parliamentary elections to come. And a few words to present Lars and the organization behind Lars Ebert. Culture Action Europe is a major European network that aims to maintain continuous dialogue and knowledge exchange between the cultural sectors in Europe and in EU policymakers. As the only intersectoral network, it brings together all practices in culture, from the performing arts to literature, the visual arts, design and cross-arts initiatives, and activist groups. In the upcoming European parliamentary elections, Cultural Deal for Europe is a campaign together with European Cultural Foundation and Europa Nostra to make culture prominent in the 2024 election campaigns. And I think we are getting ever closer to our final discussion, which is a very concrete example of what kind of things are being debated in Finland in the context of coming parliamentary elections. But now, Lars Ebert, it will be your turn, and we'll share the next 15 minutes with your ideas and thoughts.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thanks so much for the invitation to present the work of Culture Action Europe today. I'm very sorry to be not with you physically, but all the more happy to join online. And thanks also to the previous speaker, Martin. It's good to see you here as well. It's been good to collaborate, and we will broadly follow up. As you said, we will carry on the work that we've been doing together. It has been a pleasure to work together. Thanks so much for all your efforts. I'm kind of glad that, Henry, you used the word lobbying in your introduction, because normally in our kind of organizations and my colleagues, probably also my board, and many other networks that are affiliated with Culture Action Europe would try to avoid the term, because we are the good guys and not the lobby guys. But I think, and so we would always be very chic and talk about advocacy to refer to, that we are kind of neutrally informing politicians about, or policymakers about, what the sectors in culture need in Europe. But I actually think it's quite good to shift towards lobby, because really we want to influence. We want to have an impact, and we are political, and it's a political arena. So I'm totally fine and happy with lobby. Can I have the first or the second slide of my presentation, please? Or shall I share my screen? What would be easier?
Should be the one sharing the screen, so if you can do
sharing
it.
the screen. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Okay, so here we are. I hope this is the right one. Yes. Can you
It
see
is online, so things are working perfectly.
Okay. Well, with having said the lobby, we are the political voice, so lobbying absolutely fits. How do I? Yeah, there we are. We are the only intersectoral network, which means we represent all disciplines of culture and the arts and heritage, and really believe that culture serves as a fundamental cornerstone for shaping a shared future in an open, globally connected Europe. And that globally connected is really important. I'll get back to that a little bit later, ensuring the sustainability of our planet and fostering plural, open, and caring societies. When Culture Action Europe was founded 30 years ago, we are celebrating our 30th birthday this year during our annual conference in Malmö, just a month from now. We were founded under the name United Networks as the network of networks. And still, we count in our membership more than 40 trans-European cultural networks. And in a way, that networks of the networks is still the backbone of our organization, also our agency when it comes to lobbying. And in addition to that, we've got more than 70 national networks and associations, but also individual organizations, cities and regions, foundations, and individual members. And just like in the response rate of the study, we are quite weak in Finland. So I think, and I hope that we can use this opportunity to follow up conversations on how we can link the Finnish advocacy conversation to the European one, maybe in a more structured way. So what we do, we advocate for culture and the arts, we inform political decision making, but that informing really works through what we call very recently decoding, not only decoding, but also encoding. We have a very popular newsletter with our members that is called the Brussels Decoder, where we try to translate the policy language of the discourse in Brussels into normal human language. To understand where the challenges and opportunities really are at this very moment in Brussels. And of course, the other way around, if we talk to policymakers, we need to encode, so to speak, the needs of the cultural sector into a policy language. Then co-creating and sharing knowledge is really important. One example you've just heard, the study together with Pantea, where we invite our members, mainly the networks that again invite their members to contribute to gathering data, but also then interpreting and analyzing data. Another prominent example is the culture, health and well-being work that we've been doing in the Culture for Health project with a big study and policy recommendations and a big database of best practice across Europe, but also on the sustainability of the cultural sectors. And right now we are in the middle of conducting a rather major study, which we call State of Culture in Europe Barometer, that we will launch during the summer, where we really look at how the cultural sectors across Europe are perceived in public opinion and policy making and by their peers. To create and how they are linked to the policy making that happens in Brussels, to really get the temperature of the state of culture in Europe that is informed bottom up. So please stay tuned to that. You can also still contribute to that because the survey is still open on our website. And of course, we lead projects and campaigns, and that's maybe mainly what we talk about now. I want to mention our two main campaigns. As time is going fast, I will kind of flip through the one that is maybe seemingly least important for this conversation, a cultural goal. We advocate as the European network for the cultural sectors in a coalition of global networks for a cultural goal as an addition, as a standalone goal, an 18th sustainable development goal, so to speak. Just like education has its own goal, we think that culture needs its own goal, because if we talk about mainstreaming culture throughout all policy areas, that's only possible for culture to take this enabling role if it is enabled itself as a strong sector. That is a campaign that I invite you to follow. The conference, not on the future of Europe, I had almost said, but the conference on the future of the United Nations that is coming up in September will be a decisive turning point for that. And then the other campaign, which is now in the run-up to the European elections, but also in its aftermath, crucial for us and hopefully impactful, is a cultural deal for Europe, where we advocate for a central place for culture in Europe's future. In a way, in analogy to the Green Deal, which is for us a big example how greening can be put at the heart of policymaking, and I think something similar needs to happen for culture. We've been running that campaign since before 2019. Here are some advocacy milestones where we think we have made an impact. You may remember that in 2019, all of a sudden, there was no dedicated commissioner for culture anymore, at least no one with the title culture in their portfolio. We've successfully campaigned for commissioner for culture. And we fear that that campaign may be needed again after summer. And maybe not to get a commissioner for culture, but to get a sufficiently empowered commissioner for culture, and depending under which vice presidency and under which other policy frames, be it innovation, education, culture, sport, audiovisual, there are a lot of options that we carefully need to weigh. We've been pushing for 2% of the national recovery and resilience plans to be dedicated to culture. That was unevenly distributed across Europe, but let's say not all the way to 2%, but average of 2%, average 12 billion euros have been dedicated to culture, which we find quite a success. Also, the current work plan for culture that needs to be renegotiated next year has priorities like working conditions, health and well-being, artistic freedom, to which we could input. We had organized a consultation with cultural stakeholders and the member states, and are really positively surprised about how that work plan turned out. And of course, Martin has told you everything about the working conditions efforts. So I'm not going to go into that, but just to show that the campaign has had its successes in the past. At the moment, we have eight calls, 8 pleas in our campaign. Of course, increased funding through funding programs. We are advocating for including in Ukraine in a cultural deal, including Ukraine, a cultural deal for Ukraine in the cultural deal for Europe. To develop a new and inclusive EU cultural policy hand in hand with civil society. Collaborate with philanthropic sectors to address current and future cultural emergencies. Establish common standards for working conditions. I mean, that's where the momentum is there. I think I'll go a little bit deeper into that in a second. And accelerate efforts to integrate culture into sustainable development and the European Green Deal. Beyond the new European Bauhaus, I may say. And prioritize culture in discussions regarding the future of our continent in and after the 2024 European Parliament elections. Just as a little sideline, the Conference on the Future of Europe, to which we have contributed, mentions in their final report culture only in passing, which is a major disappointment, of course. We've got all these campaign tools for the different pleas, including a cultural meal for Europe cookbook. This is more the funny part of the campaign, but I'm sharing with you the ghost jello recipe, which you can find there, that addresses the working conditions based on the quote of one of the artists that we've been speaking to. We are invisible for social security in many countries. We are ghosts. So we are contributing to ghost jello. So the prospects for the future, we were really really happy to read the letter of the European Commission, the response to the European Parliament with its 13 actions, where it is stressed that the Commission wants to strengthen the implementation of existing legislation, invest in analysis and research, health and safety, undeclared work, contractual practices, and so on. We applaud that, of course. Considering the social conditionality for Creative Europe and Horizon Europe, and I'm aware of proposals for that are on the table already, that prepared by some MEPs. Reviewing the new European agenda for culture with the aim of developing a new EU strategic framework. The strategic framework was already mentioned. I think that will be the major tool for the sector to input in through national bottom-up conversations and network conversations that can come together in a Culture Action Europe coordinated action. And of course, we would be happy to contribute to a high-level round table that is proposed. Other aspects that have already been mentioned, like the taxonomy of artistic profiles and what an artist really is. There was reference to the UNESCO definition. I would also like to reference everything that has already happened in the area of higher arts education, where in the Bologna process and the tuning process and the qualifications frameworks that have been developed, there are quite clear profiles of what an artist is in Europe. So I think we can tap into a lot of existing knowledge already. And then finally, but very decisively and clearly and without any compromise, we support. We've seen that in the study as well. More than 80% of the respondents would be in favor of an EU directive. We know an EU directive is very ambitious, but I think we have to be ambitious. And we would support, propose, and push for a directive wherever possible. And I think with that, my 15 minutes are more than over, and I'll stop here. But I'm, of course, very happy to answer questions. One more last thing with regards to the European Parliament elections. I invite you to look at our website, where you will find the Pop the Vote campaign, where we work with young activists, artivists, change makers across Europe to get communities to the ballot box in June, and hopefully flip the rather bleak outlook to these elections at the moment. Thanks very much.
Much, Lars Ebert, for your speech. And I would say that it's very important from Finnish perspective that we get also a broader idea of the lobbying processes that advocacy groups are doing in Europe. I think we in Finland might be a bit more straightforward. I would say that the lobbying is rather used vocabulary in Finnish political system, but naturally advocacy gives a kind of more neutral perspective to the work that you guys are doing. And again, while listening, Lars, to your presentation, I would say that it always strikes slightly how much we have to learn about the cultural policy objectives that are there in European level. Because I would say that in Finland we are speaking surprisingly little of cultural policy issues that are of importance, for example, in parliamentary politics. And of course, naturally, this is one of the objectives and reasons also for organizing this event here, that we also would inform stakeholders in Finland what are the key issues that we should be kind of prepared for in terms of cultural policies in Europe and cultural and creative sector in Europe, and what is the Finnish perspective for that. Okay, but having said that, let's continue cooperation with these issues, Lars, and we are now moving towards the final stage of our discussion, our event. We are now going to have on stage 2 candidates for members of parliament. I'm very proud to invite to the stage Sirpa Pietikäinen and Riku Nieminen, both running for new candidates in the European Parliament. And of course, Sirpa is a veteran in this sense, having been a member of Parliament for some times already. But the chairs are here for you, and I would like you to join me in the stage, Sirpa and Riku. And also I'm going to sit down myself as well. We have some nice set of flowers here between us, so this is kind of looking like a proper TV studio. Okay, so next 13 minutes we'll be speaking of objectives.
13 or 30?
30.
Okay,
30.
nice.
Hours.
I was thinking 13. It's too little. Yeah.
Okay. So Riku got a bit concerned of
I
the
was a
pace
bit
of
concerned.
the
Thank you for inviting me. Yes,
discussions. Okay, but hey, if I'm shortly introducing, first of all, you, so Sirpa Pietikäinen, actually, how many terms have you already had in European Parliament as an MP?
Actually, 3 full terms, and then 1 term I was serving only for 1 year, so 16 years altogether.
Okay. And Riku Nieminen, let's say, still we know you better as one of the leading actors of Finnish theatre stage. And
my friends and family say that I'm the most known actor in Finland, not the most versatile or well paid, but the most known actor.
Okay. Yeah. But hey, now you have been both running a campaign for some time. It's kind of we are going into hectic periods.
Yeah.
I'm quite, let's say, curious that how often are you being asked issues concerning culture, issues concerning art, issues concerning cultural policy? Is that kind of regular theme that you are being asked of when you are doing your campaigns here in Finland?
I've been asked 0 times of anything of the cultural policies or the policies of artists or labor laws concerning artists. So it's amazing that we have this kind of an event, so we can talk about these a bit more and in a bit further way.
Well, this is the first panel, and
this is your first panel.
First panel about culture and art. I've been in another panel before.
Okay.
That was about security.
Okay.
Seriously about, of course, and that is a bit blindfolding us about what the life is all about. It is security, war, defense. Yeah. And then some parts of economic policies and austerity.
And the borders.
And refugees. That is sort of the 90% of the debate. And we as a human beings are left aside. That is the well-being, the welfare policies, the climate policies, and of course the culture. And I feel very unhappy about that. Because to me, the culture is so great part of the civilization and learning and the human capacity. And I guess the big part was because my father was an artist, he was a painter and a sculptor, and I quite literally grew under his atelier's table. So I've sort of inhaled the whole sort of way of thinking and looking, and to me the art and culture is equivalent to science, but it is totally different way of interpreting, knowing and telling than the science, and you need the both to be civilized.
My father was a policeman and my mother was a banker, so the apple, how do you say it, went very far from the tree in my account, but yeah.
Okay, well, I come from the agricultural background, so I think we are matching then to some extent. But hey...
And to me it is, I had an artist background, and then the more boring can it be than I'm trained as in economics and business administrating and serving as a politician.
Yeah.
Okay, but hey, I think you get some kind of... we have to continue what you say, Sirpa. How actually should we see the importance of culture, arts and cultural policy in terms of European parliamentary elections?
Yeah, in the European Parliament elections, I think the key moments in, like, if you discuss the the well-being of an artist or a freelancer is when the focus or the eyeballs transition from a certain industry to another industry. In my career, I've experienced it. I've done a few studio albums, and then my music has gravitated to Spotify. And then I started my television acting career when the legacy television was like the main thing you watched, and there was no social media, no YouTube. So Facebook was around, but it wasn't. The social media platforms weren't that good. But and video on demand was also not relevant then. From the European Parliament perspective, the legislators should be very concerned and very focused on these kind of transitions and these periods of time, because the risks of the devaluation of artistic work comes from there. And I'm speaking this is a little bit contradictory because I'm an artist myself and also trying to get to the parliament, so I'm trying to speak like politically correct also, but still I'm like blasting like from the perspective of an artist. So as a freelance artist, I've noticed that the biggest contractual fallacies come from those transitions of like platforms and ecosystems of having to see or experience the arts. Yeah.
Okay. And Sirpa, how would you define the importance of the necessity of cultural policy in terms and within the framework of the elections?
It has two folds. First fold is this kind of a nationalistic and national perception of a culture and art. This is a national heritage and property and competencies. Do not touch. We have our Sibelius, we have our traditions. Mummy. So, well, that we can always sell, but sort of this kind of, and the EU is seen as this kind of a threat to this, what is true Finnish and Finn. And this is actually growing because this kind of populistic movements and authoritarian populism that always has used culture and art as a tool, as this kind of a proper arts, proper culture, proper identity. We are Finns and Hungarians and Italians, and they do not mix. And then it is the broader European perspective that we have multi-fold cultures and identities. I'm a woman. I'm from EPP, European People's Party. I'm culturally oriented. I'm European. I'm globalist. I'm this and that, and none of these identities. It's a bit like that. I'm from South Karelia, and in the whatever the Etelä-Pohjanmaa, the southern Ostrobothnia is. I'm a mixture, and it doesn't sort of minimize the other identity. It enriches. So sort of understanding the European cultures together, we enrich each other, and we bring more qualities. And actually, if you would look at as from economic perspective, that actually increases the so well-known innovations and competitiveness and all that story. But it has a meaning of itself. Then how it relates on the EU, it is, of course, the immaterial property rights. You do not have art without artists. It's state capital. It is the question about having a rights fair for them. This is the debates about the libraries' rights for art contents. It is the debates between the media and the new media, where are the limits of using and redeveloping, let's say, art. When I can use your sort of art, when it is modified so much that it is a individual piece, and when it is just lending and copying. And These are the things. And then, of course, it is the support. And now, surprise, surprise, I'm going to social policies. And I think that the EU could have a common directive, I've been speaking along for that, of pension rights and social security rights for artists. That is very poor. If of course, if you are successful and known, then you are rich, rich, rich. But if not, then you really are not. And then what are the systems to secure the economic security for artists? Because then again, if you do not have the artists, you do not have the art.
Yeah, if I could add to my input, I would like to see that in a national level, the cultural stage or the cultural economic system would be considered as an industry. And in order to be considered as an industry, we have to have certain laws, certain labor laws, and certain kind of contracts between the workers and the companies. And it's a very important piece because, like in the national level, for instance, in Finland, the cultural ministry can't compete with the labor ministry or the economic ministry, like they can't like represent any data if they don't have any contracts that they can derive the input output things from things. Like it's a, and it's also an, how is it, an asenne kysymys. It's an attitude towards cultural development and cultural economics that could be like alleviated from its this kind of stigma that it's only a hobby or only thing of a passion. It's an economy, it's an industry, but in Finland, I think we have a ways to go. There, our percentage of the budget from the Finnish budget is only just below 1%, and I would concede myself with the 2% goal of a national budget for culture. It would be a great thing, but it doesn't just to put money out into the system for cultural programs. I think in the ground level it doesn't help if we don't have contracts and that they aren't how do you say, sustainable.
Yeah. Oh yes. And you were signaling.
Very briefly, I second, of course, this 2% target. Secondly, yes, the Finns should group up more with the Frenchmen, because they are very good in European level about acknowledging the importance of culture and art in general for economy and human well-being. And the third point actually would be that yes, indeed, I think that quite a number of politicians feel that the culture and art is this kind of factor like the parsley on the bread. It looks nice and you can have it there, but actually you don't lose anything if you don't have it. So don't even talk about it, because we have more serious thing like if we overall have the bread at all.
Yeah, I think there is also not the amount of support for culture, but the content, the subject matter, the content of culture, because we are unfortunately at war, so the ideologies harden, and we think that this industry or this kind of economic branch is soft and not needed. So we really have to fight for the rights of for funding and for the economic state of the arts.
Oh, yes. We heard just a few minutes ago information concerning a survey that was conducted by Pantea. We have Mr. Martin Clark here in the audience, who represents the organization that it was in charge of the survey, and that was published last week and had some important and interesting information concerning, for example, the social status of artists, be they working as employees or self-employed in our working system. And I noticed that you were, Riku, making lots of notes while listening to Martin's speech. And I think it might be rather fair to give you the first round for commenting that what struck you as interesting or important after listening to information that Pantea provided us with?
There wasn't any surprises. I was quite confirmed of my own thoughts that what is the status quo of the artist as we see it. I was a bit saddened that it's like through and through in Europe the situation is like that in other countries, but it still gives me hope, because if we unite and we tackle the issues in one country, we can share the data, share the policies into different countries, and then alleviate artists from those kind of situations. I have in my thought when because I'm a freelance artist, I have like a threefold thought of my career or how is it going. It's like when I have work, I have to take care of the contracts and the salary and the working environment and the my own artistic integrity. And when I don't have work, I need to network. I need social welfare, but because I'm an entrepreneur or an yrittäjä here in Finland, I don't get any social welfare. I just need to come by, and then I have to go to seminars, and then I have to study, and then I have to better myself. And when I've done the work, I need to take care of my pension, the royalties, the intellectual property, and where it is shown and who will get the access to my art. So it's a big like a concoction of different things, and it's a lot of things for a one person to have. If you just like compare it to, and I don't want to say that like somebody has better than an artist, but still, if you compare it for like a person who goes to a building and building site and does work, and he has a strong union and clocks out and clocks in. Okay. So it's a very different kind of environment and different kind of reality as a freelance artist or an artist. And I would say, and I don't have any data of this, but that the social welfare or the well-being in that regard is better for artists that are in contract or in conjunction with these national projects or nationally funded projects. But in the like in the deep jungle of the freelance world, the freelance artists are like a bit at a loss and at like alone, and that's the thing that EU could and should tackle. It should make the companies in the free market industry to make contracts and to make better kind of royalty deals or okay, this is very technical, but for example, the percentage of pension, how much it depends on how much do you get paid from just the actual intellectual property on or what is the percentage of your salary. So it's a jungle, and it's it's hard. Sorry, this is again. I'm a freelance artist, but I should be also talking as a candidate. But they mix up right so Sirpa can.
Okay, and I do appreciate, and we in Taike we do know about the jungle.
Yeah.
Freelance artists are kind of forced.
And
to
I
tackle.
have to say, still, I have to say that I have a lot of friends that are not not trying to be entrepreneurs, but if they just invoice through a third party their work, they could be seen as an entrepreneur and then lose their like social security, which is just it's just idiotic from my perspective. Yeah.
Before I give a turn to Sirpa, I'm summarizing a few key findings that Martin was presenting us, and I have some figures here. One of the most striking one is that we had a survey respondents number of 1,200 all across Europe. We had 14 from Finland. That was not a good result, but still also we had some respondents also from Finland. 71% of artists that answered Panteia's survey said that they have a lack of access to sufficient social protection. 46% of the respondents self-assessed that they have poor working conditions, almost half of the respondents. And I would say that even these figures show us that there are some severe limitations in terms of, let's say, protections of one's work, protection of one's social security, social welfare. Are these kinds of issues that, let's say, you have the experience working in the parliament, are these issues that could be, let's say, what is their role in the agenda? How these kinds of information could be used to make things even a little better for freelance artists that are working professionally in the field?
I had a deep sigh, as you noticed. Yes, it has been debated over the 15 years in the European Parliament, and I bet it's going to continue. I myself was not surprised with the results, because more or less being an artist is a category like being a carer or being an entrepreneur. They are not the same, they are all different, but it is a own category. And most of the artists are freelancers, as Riku said. That means that the existing social security, royalty system, benefit, pension systems do not fit. By the way, it is for the researchers. If you look at the whole European way, it is the same thing, that you do not fit the systems if you are not on a paid position in the university or some other institutions. So, okay, what could you do? Firstly, and this is the whole and the biggest debate about the royalties. What we are trying to do, not successful because there's not enough political support, and there we would need to gain the people's support. People always want to download for free anything, photographs, good comedy, painted art, sculptures, whatever.
Music.
Music, of course, that is the biggest, but obvious, but it is the others too. So the question is, you should pay for it. And that means the platform should pay for it. And then if you take a thin slice of the income of the platform and you fund it, either in European fund or in national funds, depending, there's different possibilities to create the structure or the both together. So you would have the royalties from there, and certain share you would get just by the share your own art is used in different way for us, but certain part would come in general, because they might not click your art, but the art itself being there is one reason to use and benefit the whole platform. It is a part of the dopamine thing that you use Spotify or whatever that you use. And then again, you would need to have this kind of a national agencies, and this is the big fight, because they say, look, you are entrepreneurs, take care of your own things. Yeah. You do not have any EU bureaucracy. But actually, if you would have that kind of an agency taking care of all that, okay, where do you get the royalties, how do you pay your taxes, how you pay your pensions, how do you register in the social security systems and all that system. And then, of course, you would compensate a fair share, like in cooperative on there, so it would be non-profit, but it would run out of both the royalty plus then the deductions out of the royalties basis. That would be one solution, and this agency actually could be part of this kind. It's a bit delicate, but anyway, sort of a promoter of the art, and the artists being part of that structure. And that again would then lead to this kind of European and national regulation about basic income. If you are unemployed, if you don't get any income, you get a certain, well, you are not very happy with 1,500 euros, but at least you do not starve. Then you would get unemployment in certain cases. You would gather your pension, you would get in certain cases. You would create that category and that kind of a sustained income. It doesn't make you rich, but at least it wouldn't drown it and make the phenomenon that quite a number of people then sort of leave the whole profession. If they can't sort of survive, it's easier to be an accountant.
Yeah, and many artists have like a side job or a side hustle with how we say it, like do the artwork, but it doesn't pay that much, and so you have to have another job.
Yeah,
I've done like if you could count all, I don't have any fingers or toes to count how many artistic work or jobs I've done in my career. I started from when I was 12 in theater, and I've danced and done stand-up and music and television and stuff like that.
We can imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, but hey, I'm signaling some digits for the time, but there's actually one more thing that I'd like to now focus on in the latter part of this discussion. Also, not to be in a kind of, so that we would not be speaking only of the problems or the what are the issues concerning social security. So, but again, citing Panteia's survey, 48% of surveyed artists are involved in cross-border mobility. Of course, what we are thinking in terms of European Union, we are often thinking in terms of mobility. And another theme that I personally am very interested in is the way in which European Union can help and aid our artists to preserve their freedom of expression and freedom of being an artist. Because we all know that in our borders, in European Union borders, there's a lot of pressure at the moment against the freedom of speech, against freedom of being an artist. But what do these themes, mobility or freedom of being an artist, evoke from your perspective?
Well, as an artist, it is 3 minutes. Okay, shortly. There is a big external threat, but I think it comes also because it comes from external. It comes from inside. Also the constriction of the artistic integrity, and I don't know how it should be. It should be. We should be on our toes on that and react to any slight or little deviations from that and speak loudly against it every time. But also, I think I think the threat is also that people are internalizing things that they shouldn't be talking about, or not in a way that they are aware of it. Like, so it's very tough. It's very tough, and about the mobility, I think because we heard that the artists are usually in the lowest paying decile. Yes, great word. We should have like affordable mobility, affordable kind of mobilization and affordable programs and stipendship. How do you say it?
Grants.
Yeah, grants for artists. Yeah, I think.
Okay, and final word for you, Sirpa. Keywords being mobility and artistic freedom.
There's first of all the artists at risk or in danger, and I think that we should have this kind of a network to protect the artists, let's say from Russia, from Palestine or other parts that they are persecuted, to have the freedom of the speech. Secondly, the mobility itself, as Riku told, is very important, and the residence network plays a very essential part on that. But then the third that I like the most is that the basic role for science and to art to me is to pose the right and new questions. It's not to be convenient and lovable and fun. It can be that too, but that is not the only purpose. But it is to wake up and to see new things. And we should preserve that freedom of speech and role for the artists to free expression and expression of that kind of an art too that I might not personally like or someone else, but it sort of enriches our perception, opens new windows and poses new questions.
If I could add,
And yes,
union strengthening and the right to strike should be defined in the EU level, so everybody could go into strike if your integrity is in jeopardy.
May that be the last comment for this discussion.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Riku Nieminen, Sirpa Pietikäinen, for
Thank
your
you.
input. And thank you also for your work trying to bring up the cultural issues also in the debates concerning European policies and European parliamentary
Thank
elections.
you. It's part of the Europe.
Yeah.
Please. Okay. Now I'm turning towards the audience there on streamed connections. So this has been the Arts Parliament, produced by the Arts Promotion Center of Finland. I forgot to introduce me in the beginning. Barbara Stetcher was referring to something like that who again was the host. So I have been Henri Terho, the head of art support in Taike, and this has been a pleasure. And I'm also thanking all the speakers for this event, and I think we have learned a lot from the European perspective that we should be even more keen on from the Finnish perspective. This will be seen, streamed and recorded also later on, so please, you can switch on to Taike's website in order to find this event. But let's keep connected, and I would say I'm now repeating words mentioned by Barbara Stetcher in the beginning. Please vote, and please remember cultural affairs and cultural issues when thinking of European policies. But this is all for now. Let's continue.